1, 2, 3, 4, and we're on Viewpoint. Away we go. Good morning, Mrs. Busby.
Hi. Hi. I'm just...
No, there's a good start for you, Mr. Ash.
Well, yeah, you can tell I'm the sharpest knife in the drawer. I'm just trying to get from all these intelligent men in the room how the tax business works, because I got a little baffled in Monday night's Courier.
Well, I was more than baffled.
Reading about that, and I was trying to figure out how that could be. Just because only 15% of the people voted, they were all invited. It wasn't a secret. I know we talked about it here, so anybody listening here knew we were going to have a vote.
Well, 85% apparently don't give a tinkers. So,
well, but that's not my fault.
No.
That's up to you. You know, you're invited,
exactly.
and then you can choose to come.
Well, thank goodness they saw the wisdom of most of us voters. I'd say 100% of us here in Logan County. John Fulton realized that they could parse that out because of the experience down in Sangamon County. So he had the background and the knowledge. I'd vouchsafe to say that 100% of us who voted for that tax here in Logan County assumed that it was going to be the full 1%. We didn't have any cognizance of all that they could parse that out, and thank goodness they didn't. I thought those. I was really disappointed that they were even considering it, but what can I say?
I'm sure they'd be vitally interested in how we feel about that.
Well, I doubt the heck out of that, but
maybe
I doubt that very much. Well, it's kudo time. We have a young man here in the community, young man Brandon Ron, who was featured in the Courier the other day. Very significant accomplishments, and I know his grandfather Mike and grandmother Peggy Tuckett very well. I know that are bursting with pride on seeing this article, and so kudos to young Brandon and his family. That's really neat.
Very much.
Yeah. And I noted, by the way, that the Hartsburg-Emden FAA folks once again rose to the top and had some accomplishments, so good for them. Public announcements. Something really important here. A couple of things. The Lincoln Mission Mart is going to have a Lincoln thrift store event, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more after I delve in it and get some more details. That's coming up June the 4th, and the participating store will be the Mission Mart, New Beginnings, the Pink Shutter, Goodwill, and the Salvation Army. I call your attention to that out there in Etherland so that you might be more aware of it and can support it. We will talk more definitively about that next week, but that's something I had on the calendar to be sure and mention. Then, too, we're going to have, we have an organization, John's aware of it, Heritage in Flight. They have a very modest museum out there at the Logan County Airport, and they've been very diligent about supporting things out there, and we're lucky to have that little airport out here in this county. John may have some thoughts and ideas about that, but on the May the 30th, they're going to have Airport Days, spelled D-A-Z-E, which is what I'm in most of the time anyway. So Monday, May the 30th, from noon till 9, all day, rain or shine. They're going to have a lot going on out there, and I just put you on alert, and we're going to explore that more in depth as well. Go ahead, Mrs.
Well,
Logan.
I just was going to say...
You own half this show, so you jump in anytime you wish.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just going to tell John and Jim that Bill really was in a daze the other day. He was playing golf, and he got very hit by a golf ball that came from out of the blue and got him right in the side. And he didn't break any ribs. That was lucky for him. But, that could have been a really bad thing because it was coming at a pretty good clip, and it really got him, knocked him over.
Yeah, turned to color this jacket. I mean, it's still they're about 5-inch diameter thing. If it had hit me in the head, Judy'd be looking for another partner.
Really? I mean, he really bought the farm.
I always wondered why they don't yell duck instead of forward.
Yeah, really.
Well, that was the thing that disturbed me a little bit, whizzed me as the word is, that the guy never yelled it. So it just came from nowhere. Well, anyway, May I step up to my soapbox before we bring John on?
By all means.
I'm lucky enough to receive a publication called Imprimis. It is a publication of Hillsdale's College, which is a very well-known school up in Hillsdale, Michigan. Very conservative. They accept no federal money whatsoever. Therefore, they can say whatever they please. And they put on seminars and so forth, and they have visiting speakers. This gentleman happened to be the Attorney General of the state of Virginia, Attorney General, state of Virginia, and the title of it is Reasserting Federalism in Defense of Liberty. And there's a lot that I could say, but I'm going to close with this last paragraph. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We did not pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them for the same, or one day we will spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what was once life was like in the United States when men were free. Pretty well said. Why don't you introduce our guest?
I'd like to do that. John Fulton, you know, you just have no idea how much I, and I'm not alone, depend on you to tell us what's going to happen. I'm glad you brought your crystal ball this morning.
Oh, boy.
For instance, I picked his brain this morning on what tree to plant.
Exactly. And John knows.
Yeah.
In fact, he came up with something that looks like the tree in Africa, and it's called Ammer cork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have to show Bill one of those so he can make his informed decision.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I think that the summers in Illinois are the pits. But it's not as hot as Africa.
Oh, no.
They're better in the winters.
But the tree looks like the kind that you see, the fan-shaped
It has a
things
fan
that you
shape, yeah.
see there. I dasn't complain about the weather because, good grief, we're very lucky that we haven't gotten what others have. But we have had a bit of rain. Now, what does this do to all the bug populations that we look forward to in spring and summer?
Not a lot, other than mosquitoes and black flies, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's been a good spring for them already, but other than that, the winter has more of an effect on the bug populations, and we've found out that even the severe winters don't have as big an effect as you would like on a lot of them.
In fact, I want to ask a question. I was putting some stepping stones around in my backyard, and in the process thereof, I found some small grubs, very much alive, thank you. I was surprised. I would have thought that the winter would have killed them.
No, they actually dig deep in the soil as the temperatures get colder, so that's why you can't control them from about October through about the end of March or 1st of April, because they're over a foot deep in the soil, so they don't freeze.
Should I treat that now, John, or is it too early?
You're going to probably waste your money treating grubs at this time of the year because they're only going to be a grub for a short time. As a matter of fact, some of the May and June beetles are out already.
Yes.
Those are the, excuse me, masked chafer type beetles that were traditional. Masked chafer. That's the June bug name in
Take notes,
insect lingo.
We're going to have a quiz next
Yeah.
Is
week
that
on
like the Lone Ranger masked chafer?
Sidekick, yeah. But they're already coming out of a pupa that grub turned into, and so they're going to lay eggs that'll hatch out, you know, towards the middle of July, and we'll have another set of grubs.
Yeah. So
Now,
I
the
should
Japanese beetles become our #1 grub problem, and they're about a month or so behind those June bug type grubs.
Well, what would be the very optimum time then to go after the various grubs?
Probably September.
Oh, okay.
You want them all the eggs hatched out in the grub stage, but not terribly large yet.
Okay.
Because those, you're not going to have the end of the Japanese beetle grubs hatching out until towards mid to end of August.
So you're suggesting I don't do any grub treatment until late August or September?
They're large, so they're hard to control, and they're only going to feed for maybe a month at the most. So
dig them up and go fishing.
there you go.
They're
And if you have them bad, you don't have to dig much.
no.
I went through that a year ago.
Yeah.
I lost a backyard and I don't want to repeat that.
No, it's not fun.
No. Gardening. We've had an unusual spring, to say the least. As a matter of fact, it was almost winter last night, I guess. Where are we in the stage of physically getting a nice garden in,
Well,
calendar-wise?
we should be beyond the frost-free date by about a week or so, but that's on averages. So 90% of the time you're safe and 10% you're not. And we've had some scattered frost in the last 2 or 3 days in some places, but usually you use about May 10th as that 90% safe date. Otherwise, you're into the cover and uncover mode, which there's nothing wrong with that. But basically, we're to the point where you can plant about anything you want. Some of the lima beans and the extreme warm-loving things, watermelons would also fall into that category. Especially given the year, they're going to do better if you wait a week or two yet and get some extreme warm temperatures, because soil temperature is finally up in the 70s, but it hung around about 52 degrees forever. It had actually warmed up back in early March and then retreated back to the point where the corn was taking 2.5, 3 weeks to even germinate and get going.
Yes.
So normally you like to see that happen in about a week to 10 days. So the soil temperature is also pretty critical in addition to the air temperature.
I noticed lots of corn coming up now. Do you think most of us have the corn in and they're now working with the beans?
That's the case, and you'll find everybody in varying stages as any year. Some people haven't started anything, and several are now approaching getting done with both corn and soybeans. And there's some replanting of corn going on because of those germination problems also, and some heavy rains, cool soil temperatures, and as it lays in the ground longer, you also have the potential for insect damage on kernels because it gives off carbon dioxide as it germinates, and it attacks wireworms and seed corn beetle, some of those things too.
Are you writing this down?
Yeah, I'm taking notes because I can't remember.
She can give the quiz, can't
We're
she?
going to have
Yeah.
a pop quiz. John, due to the economy and all, we're really lucky to have kept you here in Lincoln. But your duties have had to be, you had to expand your sphere of operation. Could you speak to that just a little bit about, you've gone to Springfield and you have extra counties under your guidance and jurisdiction?
Well, everybody does.
Yes.
Extension is still in the midst of a reorganization, and a lot of that was brought on by a fairly sizable loss in revenue statewide of about $7 million. There was over 100 professional staff lost positions.
Boy.
And so all counties in the state have been combined into, there is one county who stands by itself. You can probably guess which one that one is.
Yes, it goes up north here.
And there's another 2-county unit because they're landlocked across the Wisconsin border, and everybody else runs from 3 to 6 counties together with one county director and then a set of educators and program staff for the, most people know it as FMP program, the 4-H program, and that kind of thing.
So do you have Sangamon and Menard as well as Logan, or is there somebody, another
Nope,
county?
that's the 3 that are combined in our case, which is great because it's one of the most compact units, you know, with everybody kind of in a triangle of less than 45 miles. Our neighbors to the southwest go from Cass County down to Calhoun.
Oh, boy.
So there's some of those situations, and we were fortunate that we were able to put together this 3-county unit, and the mindset of the citizens is fairly similar in the 3 counties. It's pretty traditional programming with emphasis on 4-H and youth, the Master Gardener program.
I want to speak about that.
The production agriculture, the small farms, locally grown type things. So when we did a needs assessment across the 3 counties, there was only one out of a line with all 3 counties out of the top 10. So very similar in thinking.
whether we farm or we do not farm, those of us who live in the city, your office is a very, very valuable office to all of us. For instance, asking about trees and planting and so forth. We have those needs here in the city. Could you take us back, John, and tell us a little bit about the history of how the extension program got started? And that goes back a long ways.
Yes, it does. We're Logan County, as well as Sangamon and Menard, I think, all started in about 1918.
Earlier than I thought.
And once upon a time ago, Extension and Farm Bureau were one and the same. The way you started a program and got a farm advisor was by selling, I believe the number was 500 Farm Bureau subscriptions, memberships, and then you got your farm advisor. And so that's what happened in all these counties around here. And then because of some of the other farm groups didn't think that was quite kosher, there was a divorce that started in the 50s and finished in the 60s.
Even back in the 50s. I didn't realize that was when that separation came.
It was official in the early 60s, but at one time the farm advisor was also the Farm Bureau manager. And so there was a split payment scheme set up.
And usually they would, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is it true that usually they would come off, say, the University of Illinois Agricultural School? Would that be correct? Wasn't J.H. Checkby one of the original advisors here?
Well, he was about number 3, if I recall.
Really?
Elmer Ebersol was the first one, because I have a copy of that first annual report he sent in.
Yes, sir.
That'd be something.
But, yeah, there's, you had Anderson, Ebersol, Anderson, Checkley, and I think I was number 6, if I remember right. But got a lot of that from David Drake and Carl Schwantz and those kinds of folks.
Sure.
But
now, has the requirement to be an advisor changed over the years as farming and everything else have evolved and become more and more complex? Do you have more criteria that you have to meet today than Elmer did when he was the first one?
Well, I don't know. I don't know much about horses. But no,
they eat and then they make a mess. So they're just kind of like a machine.
But the jobs are so different than they were back then. You know, the term farm advisor went out in the early 60s, and it became extension advisors. And then they had specialties for agriculture, youth, home economics, and then they brought in the community development. And now in the last reorganization, they went with educators, which were very much more specific, like crops, nutrition and wellness. They lost the general titles, and then there was an administrative group, which was the county directors. So actually I'm in an administrative title as a county director and do budgets, personnel, fundraising, office space, that kind of stuff.
Well, you don't have to know horses too well to do that, do you?
Well, it depends on what community you're in.
I was also going to ask you about this flooding. Now, we're not having it, but all down the Mississippi, they're opening these gates and letting the water go out to save Cairo was the start of it. What does that do to these farmers? I know what it does to them for this year. What does it do to them for the future?
Well, number one, it makes it uncertain, because they had never had that happen in a lot of their lifetimes.
27, I think.
Are you going to go and rebuild and fix up and plan on doing that again, or if the same thing happens next year, are they going to open the gates, you know, or blow the levee or whatever it was? So that's the big thing, and it's a real catastrophe for those involved, and it's not just farms, but there's some small communities that were in those areas. And it's similar to what happened a little further north along the Mississippi back in '93, you know, where they had the levees breached, and a lot of the small towns that were built in that 100-year floodplain found out what a 100-year flood was. And it's just catastrophic for the people involved.
On balance, John, they've flooded all this agricultural land down there. How long will it take for that to make a turn and get back to, quote, normal insofar as farming is concerned?
That's an interesting question, and it all depends on the specific piece of ground, because you even see it along here, because when the creek systems flood along here, you may end up with a sandbar right through the middle of a field, and suddenly that field becomes 60 or 70% productive. And then if you get a hot, dry spell in the summer, that sand just burns up. So it all depends on the specific piece and how the currents flowed and where silt and sand deposited and that kind of thing.
But even under optimum conditions, it's a huge economic blow for those folks down there, and from which some will never recover.
Right.
It's a sad thing.
But you know, biblically, when the Nile would flood in Egypt, that was a big deal for them, because it would deposit deposits from itself on the land that were beneficial.
Some cases they'll end up with better ground than they had, probably. In other cases it'll be worse. It just depends on what gets put where. And it's interesting, along some of the creek systems through here, some of those fields never apply fertilizer because of the silt deposits carrying everybody else's fertilizer downstream, plus the decaying organic matter.
We're going to take a break in just a minute, but I want to get back to you mentioned Master Gardener. We want to talk about that in just a minute. And right now we'll take a commercial break. Thank you, Mr. Ash.